Welcome to another episode of the Dare to Transcend podcast. Today, I've got a special guest, and we are going to have a lot of fun. Tell you more about that when we get back. So today, I'd like to welcome Dianna Lyngholm to the show. Dianna is the Director of Creative Services for Fun.com, where she leads website experience, content, and CRM, working with licensing giants like Hasbro and Disney. Di and her teams also produce creative assets and curate marketing strategies to optimize seasonal revenues. She has spent 10 plus years of experience building brand experiences online and offline for large and medium-sized companies. So welcome to the show, Di. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be on.
So before you dive into your story, can you just tell us a little bit about what Fun.com is? Because it sounds like fun.
Yes, I get thought. So Fun.com is kind of the parent company of Fun.com, HalloweenCostumes.com, and Halloween.com. Generally, we're a very seasonal business. September and October, we kind of call it harvest time. Revenue in October for one day is comparable to all of June for us, if you want to try to put it into perspective there. So we really focus on Halloween, working with those licensors and making costumes specifically for them. About 50% of the costumes are designed in-house, and we work directly with the manufacturers. And then we're leveraging all of those licenses onto the Fun.com side and making really awesome apparel, accessories, shoes, backpacks, and collectibles with those licensors. So trying to offset that seasonality a little bit.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. So how did you end up at Fun.com, and sort of tell us a little bit about your career?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I started really retail management when I was in college. So I've always kind of had the customer at heart, and retail's always kind of been in my blood. Definitely was ready to get out of stores, though, at a certain point.
I hear you. I spent the first few years of my career in retail as well. And I know the grind of store management. Well, it's a great experience because you certainly, you really learn how to run your own small business to a large degree. So it's a great experience. The hours, and yeah, they're tough.
Yeah. And as you get older and want a family and you're on your feet all the time, yeah, definitely a young person's role. But I got out of that shortly after I got married. We had moved, and I'm in Mankato, Minnesota, which is about an hour south of the Twin Cities. And it's the headquarters of Taylor Corporation. Taylor Corporation's a very large printing industry. They print wedding invitations and business and labels and basically everything. If you want a Shutterfly, a lot of products are printed by Taylor Corporation. So there's like 90 different companies within Taylor Corp. Not all of them here, but I worked my way in between different ones and up the ladder in a variety of different roles: product management, product development, marketing roles, and really Taylor Corp gave me so many opportunities because you can prove yourself somewhere and then move laterally or upwards into a different Taylor company in the area pretty easily. And after I had spent, I want to say 8-9 years within Taylor Corporation, an opportunity opened up at Fun.com for a marketing director. And I was like, I'm ready for a change, get out of print. It seemed like fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
So I applied there and ended up meeting with my current boss, the CMO. And we were chatting, and my love for branding came through, and creative, which I had some creative teams in my marketing director role at a Taylor Corp company called Carlson Craft. And he's like, we're not hiring for a creative services director right now, but it's been in our org chart as something we want to do in the future. And I ended up in several interviews later with all the executive teams. They put me into that role. So it was very fortuitous, I guess, and kind of felt like this is a sign, right path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love, I was indirectly involved in the printing industry during my career, and mostly hiring printers.
Sure.
My company did books, so I had to hire printers, and the printing industry is really interesting, really changing, especially today, but not exactly exciting or creative.
Or creative. Yeah. Not too much. Really depends, but yeah. So at fun.com, I still have the same title, started owning creative, copywriters, graphic design, and then the photo studio and editing. And over time, the company has grown. It's more than double what it was when I started there for revenue. And we've added new teams and created new focuses. And so I've gotten to own website experience now. And the CRM marketing team. So have my hand in marketing and creative, which for me is a dream because I'm very analytical, but also creative, and I get bored if I only have one of them. So, yeah.
I love that. That's really interesting because some people have a hard time shifting back and forth between the analytical and the creative. I sometimes get stuck with that myself, especially when I'm trying to write, fiction. It's like I need to get into a very creative space. So how do you go back and forth? Do you carve out time for creativity? How do you nurture your creativity?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I definitely try to be cognizant if I'm in a creative flow, that I don't want to get out of that, and I'll just ride that wave. But there's moments where it's like, okay, on Fridays, I have nothing blocked for meetings for the most part. I try to keep that day wide open so I can make sure I get my creativity in there, that I'm able to go through and look and critique our video commercials or photo shoots on that time, so that I can get in that flow and that brain space. But usually when I'm doing creative or analytical side of things, I don't know, maybe it's the creative in me. I'm always looking at how do I creatively solve a problem with it, so I'm still kind of in this creative mode, even though I'm analyzing data. Does that make sense?
No, it really does. I still am very fond of spreadsheets, right? even
the nerd in me, right?
Even after all these years out of corporate, I'm still very fond of spreadsheets. And I was doing a talk to a writers group the other day, and actually I use spreadsheets to keep track of my characters and their characteristics and all that kind of stuff in my books. So there's a great support to creativity, to have that analytical, to have that structure, to be able to kind of put things in boxes. People think it narrows our creativity, but in some ways, providing that structure can really open it up.
Oh yeah, many creatives I've worked with over the years are like, spreadsheets, no, that scares me. I don't, formulas, and a few, I've ones that I've brought into management over the years and worked with developing, they definitely honed their skills and realized how much of a great tool it can be. I want to test the creative on something. I got to see how it actually performed and be able to see those results and go, yeah, that was better. Let's keep going that route. And yeah, they've managed to kind of glom onto it over time.
Absolutely. So, is marketing what you dreamed of? I mean, you said you got into retail early, and now you kind of come into marketing. How does marketing play out compared to where you thought you were going to be when you started out?
Sure. When I was younger, I was all about biology and wanted to be a pediatric surgeon or anesthesiologist, things like that. And I still find all of that very, very interesting. And when I went to school for sales and marketing with a medical concentration to do medical sales. I ended up at Taylor Corp and really enjoyed the business side, and it was B2B marketing. And I would get feedback from superiors over the years while I was in the print industry that I'm really more a B2C marketer, and I think that's that customer piece in me, right? So landing at Fun has worked really well, but I don't know. I considered a lot advertising at one point too. I don't know how many times you changed your major, if you ever did, but
I did.
3 for me. So I think, I've ended up at a place that just saying yes to things that came in front of me that felt right, it got me onto that path. Even thinking way back into middle school, I remember an art teacher that would call me out, came up and talked to my parents afterwards, she really has an eye, this and that. And I mean, for me, bless my parents, I'm an achiever and a pleaser. I was like, I can't do art. Like that's, I need something, something that's got some more teeth to it, right? Then here I am in a creative role, and yeah, it's fun.
Well, it's so funny how things like that often bubble to the surface in ways we don't expect, and in our lives. We use our skills and talents maybe not in the ways we expected to. Right, to your point, you're not doing art, for pure art for the art's sake, but obviously there's a lot of graphic design, there's a lot of looking at art, there's a lot of art involved in what you're doing. And it's, people used to ask me when I graduated from college, because I left being a business major and went to be an English major, and my parents and everybody else were horrified. They're like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do with an English major? You're not going to be able to do anything. And I'm like, but so I can analyze, I can write, I can put arguments together, I can do anything. And I know my writing, I always say that my writing definitely contributed to my success at work, because that ability to, be succinct, boil things down, all of those skills that I learned as an English major actually worked really well in the business world.
Oh yeah. I bet helped you stand out for sure.
Yeah, so it's really interesting how we think we get into this mindset that, okay, well, I was an English major, I either have to teach or I have to be a writer. And of course, now I have embraced being a writer more full-time, but those skills bubble up and can help us in ways in our careers in business that we don't expect.
Yeah.
So you said, you left retail and you went into to work at Taylor. Did you feel when you were doing that? I mean, it sounded like, you picked a local company, you maybe were making career decisions that were compatible with your family. What do you think you've given up along the way of trying to, balance your career and achieve the success that you have?
Sure, yeah. I mentioned saying yes to the right opportunities along the way. I have a hard time saying no. And over the years, I've gotten much better at it. But definitely even in my current role, I find myself saying yes too much, and I'll catch myself and I'll talk to my boss and I'll be like, I just have way too much on my plate right now. I'm not doing anything well. And something will come up, an opportunity, and the execs will throw it at me. And then I will write a very long email about why I'm saying no. And I remember the first time I did that, my boss came by and he's like, that was a very good no. I'm sorry. I can now feel like I can say that. But saying yes to almost everything definitely has taken a toll on my time with my family, with my kids. I have two. They're almost 11 and 13 now. But I remember, and I won't name names or companies, but at one point in my career, I remember missing that first day of school because I couldn't even be in town. And so my husband had to drop them off, and I'm going to try not to get emotional about it, but I was so emotional about it.
Oh, yeah.
And I went into work the following day. I had been up in the cities for something for work, which is why I missed it. And I remember getting some feedback that was really critical, and it didn't feel warranted from my boss at the time, not my current boss, but my boss then. And I started crying, and I'm not a crier, and I don't cry at work. I try not to, right? It's very, very few times. But I started crying because I had missed that day, and that was happening. And I was just like, what more can I give, Yeah. And they said, well, we were wondering when you'd break. And I was like, okay, that's it. This is a wake-up call. I know. How much more could they give me before I finally was like, that's enough, And so I try, it's a very big lesson for me, making sure that I'm keeping things in balance and saying no when it's appropriate. And also, as a leader with my managers, I see some of them that I see it, just like me, where they're not saying no, they're saying yes, and they're hungry, and maybe don't have families yet, but I don't want them to get in that habit. So I try to check in and make sure, like, okay, do you have too much on your plate right now? Can I help you deprioritize something or take something off your plate, or we'll push something, and making sure that I'm getting a no from them every once in a while, so they feel comfortable with that.
Which is a great point, because we do, and there's pros and cons, right, to the saying yes. So I love that you let your career unfold sort of organically by saying yes to opportunities that have come up, versus having the I have to do it this way, right? And I think that in the end, I mean, at least for me, I think that ends up creating a more fulfilling and interesting work experience when you say yes to opportunities that present themselves versus, getting those blinders on. But it's a double-edged sword. Like you said, we also can say yes to too much. And I think as women, we tend to do that a little bit more sometimes than guys do. And I love that you're teaching, the people that you're mentoring and working with to say no sometimes, because that's a really super important skill.
Yeah. I don't want them to learn it late.
Yeah, you don't want them to learn it the way you did. I mean, there's a couple of things in that story that I want to unpack for a minute. And the one is, and I remember I cried one time that I can remember at my office, and it was one of those things that I think I had been like expecting a promotion and went in to talk to my boss and thought I was going to get the promotion. And instead of telling me I was getting the promotion, he told me he had hired somebody above me. It was bringing somebody in between me and him. And and by the way, the guy was waiting down the hall for me to meet him.
Wow. No moment to process.
no time to process, no whatever. And I cried. I will admit that I cried, and I was so embarrassed and so horrified, because that's not who I was at work. I was, the professional executive, and that's not who I was. But, I look back on it now, and we think about those things. And what is so horrible about crying once in a while at work?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a cultural block there, right?
Yeah.
It's you can't, unless you're, I mean, I've had people cry in my office before, they're overwhelmed, things like that. But it never in front of a bunch of people. And mine thankfully was only in front of my boss at that time. But yeah, it's definitely something that it's a stigma, right? If somebody's seeing you cry, like,
yeah, it's a stigma, but we're human. I mean, yeah. and some people, that's how they process emotions, right? I think particularly women sometimes, instead of, when we get angry, sometimes instead of getting angry and lashing out and, becoming aggressive, which it tends to be the way men do it, and I know I'm stereotyping a little bit here, and I don't like to do that, but, but sometimes women, when we get really angry, we actually cry. And first, right, that's kind of our initial reaction, because we kind of go past the anger to the hurt, and then go back to the anger, right? And it's like, how do we create a workplace where people actually can be human, like to recognize that, every once in a while we're going to have moments of weakness. We're going to have emotions when our emotions, overtake us, and to give people the space to have, to your point, to have that time to process, to let that happen. We certainly don't want people making decisions or, in front of customers or, doing major things when they're in an emotional state. But do we give them time to recover, or do we just criticize them for it?
Right. And it's almost a good thing if you think about it. If they're allowed to be emotional and cry, then they're not like blocking it, and making those decisions in an emotional state, you can tell and you can give them that time when they have that like physical reaction.
Yeah. And you also give people that, to your kind of the let the emotions out, to be real about how they're feeling about things, and not just stuff things down, because as I have a dear friend who passed away recently, but one of her favorite sayings was, anger comes out sideways, right? So those emotions are gonna come out. They're gonna come out some way, somehow.
Yeah.
Whether it's we stuff them all down and then they come out in our personal lives, which I think happens a lot, or they come out in some other way at work. So I don't know. It's just true. It's just really interesting. So then I guess the second thing that I wanted to unpack in which you said was the comment that we were wondering when you were going to break. What did that mean to you when they said that?
Kind of like a test. I was still pretty new into the role. And so I think it was kind of like, well, how much can we give this person until they finally like have had enough? Now we know what their breaking point is, we know, which I can understand to a degree, but maybe not in the professional field. Like if maybe I'm on a sports team, right? Sure. But yeah, I guess it kind of felt, to that degree, just like, okay, let's push this person as far as we can until we know, okay, that's their threshold for how much work we can give them and how much stress we can put on them. I don't agree with it or like it by any means. That's just what I think that they were getting at there.
Yeah, no. So what happened after that point? Did they back off? Did they give you less stuff? Or did you, what was the result of that for you?
That's a great question. I think it stayed pretty stable. And I learned from that to say the no's more. So I guess in a way, maybe it was good for me, because had I not gotten to that point, maybe I would have at some point, and it just would have been even longer before I learned that. So as much as it sucked, for lack of a better term, it was probably a good thing in the long run for me personally. But yeah, it pretty much stayed consistent after that, and I just got better at being like, nope, I'm maxed out.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe they listened to you better after that.
Probably.
We can let this woman crying in my I don't want this woman crying in my office again, so I'm gonna, when she says no, I better listen, right? I guess it's one way of
exactly
getting a ton of
boundaries. Yeah.
Let's not have that happen again. So so as you move forward with your career, I mean, it sounds like you're in a fun place. And it sounds like a really interesting career. Where do you see your career growing in the future? Where do you see the growth opportunities?
Yeah. I love fun.com. I love my current role, and I love that I continue to learn and get pushed in new ways and have the ability to do that. I'm given that like permission, if you will, to explore new things. And our company continues to grow. So I hope that I get to do this with fun.com. But I'd love to step into like a VP of brand or a CXO kind of role, keeping that customer, at heart, as I have throughout my entire career. I've always loved brand development and connecting with folks. Social media and AI, all of the changes there have really opened up so many different opportunities to do that with customers, and trying to do that in an authentic way with AI. I've really dove into that with my teams, and I'm excited to see where that goes, trying to stay on top of everything so I can, lend that expertise to fun.com and hopefully help others, and maybe it'll land me somewhere else too. I try to be open. I'm not out there looking for something, but if the right thing comes across that I'm like, this feels right, I'm going to say yes to this one, kind of thing. That's kind of how it's worked out for me before. So I want to continue on that track.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's funny because I used to love to hire people who had worked in retail for, you know, various roles. And most of the time that worked out because, to your point, I think people that work in retail, the one thing that it really gives you is that very intense customer experience learning, right? Because you're in the middle of it. I mean, you're dealing with, you know, the person that's, you know, screaming at you because they're unhappy, but something or other, or the people that are just so grateful for your help. And you have the whole range of people experiences. And I think that really informs not only your sensitivity to customers, but, you know, your sensitivity to other people, because you look at everybody more as a customer. So I love that you built on your retail experience and your customer experience in order to create that in different environments.
Yeah. And nowadays it's so different too, in that, you know, it's behind a screen or it's on the phone. It's so much less in person, and having bless the customer service folks that can do that and take those calls, just screaming at them all the time. But it's an entirely different situation when you cannot mute them and just be like, right? You're in no bad internet.
Yeah. Listen, it is. No, 100%.
Yeah. So
it is, and it is a totally different experience. And so people like you that are creating the online experiences that can feel personal, that can feel engaging, and not just, you know, getting lost in a, you know, I know I sometimes, particularly like on Amazon, I always feel like I'm getting lost down these rabbit holes when things come up. So I love that you're doing that. So if there was one thing that you wanted to share with women who are coming behind you, whether it's in retail or whether it's in printing or any industry, what do you think is the one biggest factor in your success?
Yeah, I think we kind of picked up on the thread a few times throughout, but keeping your options open and keeping your eyes open and peeled for opportunities that feel right, and saying yes to those. Not, oh, is this the right time? I don't know. I just had a baby. I mean, I literally changed from print to fun right after my daughter was born. Like, it was, it's like, oh, I don't know, right? And you want to just stay comfortable in those moments where big life changes are happening. And sometimes it doesn't come when you think it's going to come, and just embracing it and rolling the dice a little bit, you know, having faith in yourself and getting out of your comfort zone.
I love that. And, you know, I always talk about, when I talk about risk taking for women, I always talk about really checking in with ourselves to see whether we're making excuses or we have valid reasons for not making those changes. And I always laugh because, I mean, I'm the queen of excuses. I would be the first to admit, or I used to be, sort of before I learned that lesson. But it's very easy to create excuses like, oh, I just had a baby, I can't make changes, and turn down opportunities that you know, might be exactly the right things that we need right now. So that is a beautiful piece of advice. I love that, Di. Thank you so much for joining us today. So if people want to get in touch with you, learn more about fun.com or learn about Di Lyngholm, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. DiLyngholm@gmail.com is my email. You could also reach me on LinkedIn. It's Di Lyngholm.
Awesome. Thank you again for being with us and sharing your wisdom today. I'm Karen Bulluck. Thank you for joining us for the Daring to Transcend podcast. Make sure that you like and follow our YouTube channel so that you don't miss another episode. Thanks and have a great day.